Hello, EDUSPLORERs. Thanks for joining us again and welcome back to our channel. In this episode, I want to look at France's fundamental geopolitical failures regards to its strategic engagement in the continent of Africa. Listen, the times have changed. Africa has moved. African nations are making strategic engagement at the moment for their own interest. And one country that does not understand is the country of France. This is fundamentally important. There's been a geopolitical shift in the region, and France doesn't get it. France's strategic engagement in Africa has been based on colonial policies. This colonial engagement or strategic contract in the colonial era do not reflect the current fundamental challenges faced by the continent of Africa. These nations have talked about this over and over, but because France either gave a deaf ear on it or do not see any reason why these countries must change, why they have to move in a direction that gives them a fundamental breathing space. Listen, folks, Africa at the moment is crowded in terms of strategic partnership. Africa cannot do it alone. Africa needs partners like every other continent. With the involvement of the Chinese, the Americans, the Russians, the European Union partners like Germany, Netherlands, other countries that are heavyweights in the economy, Turkey, India, Middle Eastern partners, and some emerging countries in the continent of Africa like South Africa. Listen, France does not have a clue on what the shift has been in the past couple of months. People fail to learn that France's relationship with Africa is not about the past 24 or 48 months. These relationships had been in the colonial days, and these grievance still sit in the minds of a number of those leaders. And when these governments lie low, France comes up and wake them up with its blunders in terms of policy speeches, failure to understand the region, condescending behavior, paternalistic approach, unequal partnership, and the level of entitlement that France sometimes communicate. I wonder where they got this information from. Listen, Africa has decided that the challenges that are facing the continent at the moment are bigger and larger than what France thinks. Folks, we are approaching 40,000 subscribers. A number of you watch our videos and do not subscribe, but you continue to click the like button. We appreciate that. But please continue subscribing so we're able to grow this platform. These leaders have said the colonial partnership, the colonial contracts, the colonial engagement, the colonial relationship does not reflect the current strategic things that are needed for the countries to move forward. Times have changed. We are in the era of communication superhighway with social media platforms. Information is robust. It moves so fast. These citizens of these countries are observing the development in other regions around the world. They are observing other developments within the continent of Africa. They have neighboring countries that are doing well. And to say that these countries should stop in one spot because they have to hook up with France to move forward, I think it's a fundamental failure. If your foreign policy is engaged with your partners based on the colonial mindset, then there is a major problem with regards to that foreign policy. It needs to be revised. It doesn't work. That's why France continues to have these roadblocks, these pushbacks, these paternalistic options, these options that do not work. These will never work because these countries have said, we're not going to do it the way you wanted us to do it before, because we are at the moment where Africa is facing big challenges. The continent have decided that looking at the African Continental Free Trade Area, there are huge opportunities in there, and these nations want to have a piece of that particular progress. The Chinese are there getting busy, projects, other investment. The European Union are trying to figure out themselves. African nations are making strategic choices. And France cannot win this particular geopolitical engagement at the moment. It's been late for France. France have to accept this and go back to the drawing board and think how to engage these countries. Listen, France will continue, and what it's doing now is really bad in terms of the geopolitics. Why am I saying this? By alienating leaders of these countries that are from West Africa, other African governments are observing very closely. They are listening to their approach. They are listening to the collaboration. They are listening to the condescending approaches. This will not work. African nations have decided to break free, especially those from West Africa. Listen, they want to have for the first time an opportunity to try something new. The old method tied in these colonial contracts, this unforgiving relationship, it's not working. It's not giving them the boost that they need at this time. Don't forget, African countries now are focused on who is going to bring social policy, education engagement, communication, technology, agriculture, strategic relationships that are meant for win-win partnership, social engagement, medical arrangement, a lot of social policies, and more importantly, financial investment in infrastructure. If you are an African partner, you are not involved in one of these things I'm talking about, you're making a huge error, because that's not what the continent needs at this time. So France will continue to have loggerheads with this region, would continue to have problems with the continent of Africa, because it failed to muster the courage to tell these countries that I can offer X, Y, Z that these Chinese cannot offer you, the Russians cannot offer you, or the Americans cannot offer you, or the European Union cannot offer you. France does not have that A plan. Its strategic engagement with Africa has been based on the colonial documentation, the manipulation, the forceful implementation of its own policy, the use of its military to seek protection and also hold down its strategic interest in the region. These are colonial policies that will not work in this now and day of age. Folks, I don't understand why France does not want to look at African governments and those strategic partners in the region as equals. They have to do that. It's so simple. It's the simplest thing. France is not the most important country in the world at the moment. African countries are being coerced. They are working alongside other new partners that offer something different. These countries offer Africa different options. So France is not relevant. It's not so important at all. So the France has to accept its failures. France must accept its fundamental failures in Africa. Once it starts from accepting that, then it goes back to the drawing board and figure out what can they bring on the table. But if they feel they cannot work with Africa as equal partners and work together from the strategic engagement, because don't forget, Africa faces challenges now that those colonial contracts, the paternalistic approaches do not reflect the current strategic problems that Africa face. Africa will go towards partners. It doesn't matter whether it's in the European Union, the United States, Asian partners like China, India, or Russians, or Middle Eastern partners, those who have something to offer on the table. If you don't have anything to offer the continent of Africa, don't engage. Military engagement is part of this, but it's not a fundamental thing Africa needs. There are a lot of social issues that need to be resolved, and France is not playing in those particular areas. That's the reason why France will continue to have these roadblocks in the continent. Now, France just blew it up. Why I say they blew it up? Because the narrative has been that these governments are taking over and behaving in the manner they are. Okay, the population was split. But with such communications, it tells the populations of these countries that the times have changed. The colonialists do not want to listen. They do not have a clue on our difficulties that we are going on. Look at Guinea, look at Burkina Faso, look at Mali. These countries want to reopen new negotiations in a number of areas. These countries have painful history with France. And France do not remember so fast. The relationship hasn't been just 24 years ago. It hasn't been just 2 years ago. These are colonial relationships for centuries. France has a terrible record in the region. And by France's behavior at the moment, it gives room for these countries to start speaking up, to start going back to the drawing board, looking at the colonial days. This particular fundamental failure that France is facing, it has itself to blame. France has a number of opportunities to focus on the region. But at the moment, African countries' priorities have changed. The president of Chad said it. Your contract and relationship with us do not reflect the current challenges that the world faces. Senegal repeated it, that the current challenges that we are facing do not reflect our partnership with you. Ivory Coast said the same thing. Guinea said the same. Mali said the same. Niger said the same. Burkina Faso said the same. And the Anglo-Saxon countries too are watching very closely on France's behavior. And these will trickle down to the other areas of the region and will increase anti-French sentiment. And then the media will pick it up and talk about this short news cycle. No, this relationship has been there for centuries. And this is where the problem is. France needs to go back to the drawing board, revise its African policy, and come to the table as equal partners. If not, these pushback and roadblocks will continue. It is important for that Africa nations have different priorities, and that's why they are looking to connect with other like-minded countries in the region. If you watch a video most recently where the president of the country of Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traore, traveled to Ghana to attend the inauguration of the Ghanaian president, he received a heroic welcome. Why? It's not by coincidence. This is something that it tells you that other African countries are observing what's going on. They are looking at the geopolitical environment. They understand the challenges that are happening within the region. So by such a reception, it tells you that there is something happening and you cannot ignore. Listen, France has not brought its A game on the table. Full stop. Let's not pretend. Talk about this. France hasn't engaged African countries. If France has done something, let's improve it. It cannot prove it because if you look at France's investment and compare to that to the Chinese, even the Americans who are in Lobito corridor at the moment, they want to show the world that they have arrived. The United States have involved African investment in a number of areas. You cannot take that from them. PEPFAR, awful lot of other very important strategic issues they've been involved. They have their flaws as well. The European Union is also there. France does not have that geopolitical solid foundation to talk about its entitlement in Africa, and that's where the problem is. We want to make our own decisions by ourselves. We want to find out what's happening. If these countries are doing the right thing, we're going to find out. If they are doing the wrong thing, we're going to find out. Allow them. Do not come and make policy speeches that will alienate or cause even more pain. Because remember, these countries do have archives. They have history with France. They can pull out documents. They can talk about the colonial history. When they start talking about the colonial issues with France, then the relationship deteriorates to a certain level. So if France have this mentality of not accepting to work as equals, then there is a fundamental problem. I want to thank you for watching. Leave me a comment, subscribe and share the video. Watch other informative video on our YouTube channel. We are looking forward to meeting you soon in our next episode. Have a good day. Bye-bye.